Okay, so today in the Precon Chop Shop, we're looking at the Riders of Rohan Commander Precon from the Lord of the Rings set. The primary theme here is human tribal that is simply swinging in at your opponent's face. It's definitely a nice, straightforward strategy that's going to make it very easy for new players to jump in and play the game with this Precon. The face commander is Éowyn Shield Maiden, but is anyone else bothered that she doesn't even have a shield in any version of her cards? That aside, she is a 5/4 legendary human knight with first strike for 2 blue, red, white. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if another human entered the battlefield under your control this turn, create 2/2/2 human red knight creature tokens with trample and haste. Then, if you control 6 or more humans, draw a card. Éowyn is a freaking beast and should probably remain the commander for this Precon. As a single, it's a fantastic pickup since humans are the 5th most popular tribe in Commander, and this is the only human commander in these colors. Even so, I don't actually expect this single to be more than $1 thanks to the hunt for the One Ring and the multiple copies of Éowyn that are going to wind up in circulation as a result. Wait a week after release and pick it up when it's cheap if you don't want to buy the Precon. Aragorn, King of Gondor, is equally amazing. He's a 4/4 legendary human noble with vigilance and lifelink for 1 blue, red, white. It says when he ETBs, you become the monarch. Whenever Aragorn attacks, up to 1 target creature can't block this turn. If you're the monarch, creatures can't block this turn. There are 9 cards that play with the Monarch mechanic in this Precon, so buying it might be worth it since you can effectively split the Precon into 2 different decks, which both have a great deal of potential to be absolute powerhouses. As a single, Aragorn again might be cheap, but many of the new Monarch cards in the Precon might not be. I do think that the Precon is a good deal just after looking at these 2 cards. Next, we'll look at the other legendary creatures that can command their own decks or go into the 99 of better decks. Faramir, Steward of Gondor, is a 2/2 legendary human noble for 1 white blue. It says whenever a legendary creature with mana value 4 or greater ETBs under your control, you become the monarch. Then, at the beginning of your end step, if you're the monarch, create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens. And again, it seems that we have a really solid card. This can easily fit in a Legendary Matters deck that uses the colors like Joda to easily get you extra cards thanks to Monarch. Or by itself, it's a fantastic human or token commander, and in those colors you have easy access to flyers to help take and keep Monarch. Even so, again, I don't think this will be very expensive, but it's absolutely a single worth picking up if you like either of those strategies. Theoden, King of Rohan, is a 2/3 legendary human noble for 1 red, white that says whenever it or another human ETBs under your control, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. This is absolutely a strong support card in the 99 rather than a commander by itself. If you have multiple humans hitting the field, you're giving multiple creatures double strike. This, with Éowyn on the field, means that those 2 human tokens that she makes will give each other double strike, while Theoden will give it to Éowyn. If your opponents can't block that incoming damage, it's a total of 18 damage in a swing from 3 creatures. Absolutely a support card all the way and is phenomenal in this deck. As a single, it belongs in every Boros human tribal deck from now on. I want to say this will be around $5, but if this turns out to be the best Precon, everyone will pick it up, and the versions from the booster packs are going to make it very cheap. Boromir, Gondor's Hope, is a 3/4 legendary human warrior for 2 white blue that says, whenever it ETBs or attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a human or artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Boromir is a great support card in Human Tribal. Its blue coloring might hinder it a little bit in that case though. It's a great fit in this Precon obviously, and the effect is very strong, but as part of the 99 in other decks, this as a single is going to be extremely cheap since it's much less effective as the lead of its own deck. Eomer, King of Rohan, is a 2/2 legendary human noble with double strike for 3 red-white. It ETBs with a 1/1 counter on it for each other human you control. And when it ETBs, target player becomes the monarch, then it deals damage equal to its power to any target. This is pretty wild and a fantastic human tribal support card, but again, its limited usability is going to send it right into the cheap pickup pile thanks to its high mana cost and limited use. Prince Imrahil the Fair is a 2/2 legendary human noble for white-blue that says, whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. This is definitely a support card in either draw decks or human or soldier decks. This won't be more than $1 and a cheap pickup for any of those strategies if you don't have something better for the slot. Denethor Stoneseer is a 1/3 legendary human noble for 1 and a blue that says, when it ETBs, scry 2. Then, you can pay 3 and a red, tap and sack it to make a target player the monarch, and it will deal 3 damage to any target. This is a dust collector. If you want this in your deck for some reason, someone will probably just give it to you for free. Gilrain Dunedain Protector is a 2/3 legendary human noble for 2 and a white that says, pay 2 and tap it. Exile another target creature you control. You may return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If you don't, at the beginning of the next end step, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control with a vigilance counter and a lifelink counter on it. Now this thing is a great support card. Clearly it's great for blink decks, but having the choice to put the card back on the field immediately to protect it from targeted removal, or bring it back at the end step to protect it from a board wipe is pretty crazy. On top of that, it can be used to make a beefy attacker even better right before your own turn begins. Due to that utility, this one as a single might actually be more than $1, but since it's not over the top powerful, it's not going to reach 2. Gimli of the Glittering Caves is great. It's a 1/1 legendary dwarf with double strike for 2 and a red. It says whenever another legendary creature ETBs under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Gimli. Then, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. So yes, this is a fine include in Legendary Matters, but most of the decks that Gimli is going to be put in are going to be treasure-based decks, since it can generate 2 treasures on its own. It's going to slot just perfectly into a Magda Dwarf treasure deck. This one might get to over $2, but thanks to the perfect storm of rabid box opening, this card won't actually be that expensive as a single pickup, at least right away. It might really get expensive later on. Baragond of the Guard is a 3/3 legendary human soldier for 3 and a white that says, whenever it or another human ETBs under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Since mono white has so many dedicated card slots to make it viable with card draw and ramp, Baragond won't be the commander of many human decks. It will, however, become a staple in the 99 of those decks thanks to its ability to end games and its mono-white color identity. Throw this on the field when you're swinging with a bunch of humans while rabble-rousing is on the field, and watch those attacking creatures get absolutely massive. I think this one will also see a $2 price tag, but it's going to be lowered again thanks to the flood of singles that are going to hit the secondary market as people hunt for the One Ring. Erkenbrand, Lord of Westfold, is a 3/3 legendary human soldier for 3 and a red that says whenever it or another human ETBs under your control, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. This is Baragond in red, but since it doesn't give your creatures trample or anything for that matter, it's just going to be much cheaper than Baragond and might actually be replaced by other red cards that could do more for the same mana value. Oddly enough, this one will probably be a bargain pickup or another dust collector, even though it's largely identical to Baragond. Before we move on, if you like what you've seen so far, why don't you hit that like button and sub to the channel so you don't miss more videos like these in the future. It'll help more people find the video if they like magic, and it'll help the channel grow at the same time. Thanks. Now we can finally move on to the new non-legendary creatures exclusive to the Precon. Archivist of Gondor costs 2 and a blue and says, when your commander deals combat damage to a player, if there is no monarch, you become the monarch. Then it says at the beginning of the monarch's end step, that player draws a card. If your monarch deck has blue, this should go in it. If you want to attack with your blue commander, this should go in the deck. Even though this seems really good to me, I don't think that the price is going to be very high on this one. I'm not confident it would even break $1, but that's going to be a great thing for us budget builders. Grey Host Reinforcements is a 1/1 Spirit Soldier with flying in Ward 3 for 3 and a white. It says when it ETBs, exile target player's graveyard. Put a number of 1/1 counters on Grey Host Reinforcements equal to the number of creature cards exiled this way. This card will scale depending on whether or not you're going against a creature-heavy graveyard deck, but will still be a great creature to have in a Spirit or Soldier deck. Probably going to be around $1 as a single, but a pretty weird include in our human tribal precon. Lossernuk Captain is a 3/1 human soldier with first strike for 3 and a white. Then, whenever it or another human ETBs under your control, tap target creature and opponent controls. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. You get that token no matter what, so that's not too bad. But in this deck specifically, when Éowyn drops those 2 human creatures, you can immediately tap the defender's 2 best blockers. However, I'm not convinced that this is good enough to be a pricey single. Giving your creatures flying might be more effective than this, so it might actually end up being another dust collector, even though it has the potential to be very good. Riders of Rohan is a great flavor include. It's a 4/4 human knight for 3 red-white. That's that rhymed. It says when it ETBs, create 2 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. It also has dash for 4 red-white, which will give it haste and return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And again, this is going to be a very cheap pickup for any token deck, but even then, there are too many better options that will eventually replace this card, sending it into a box, never to be seen again. Champions of Minas Tirith is a 4/6 human soldier for 5 and a white. When it ETBs, you become the monarch. And at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, if you're the monarch, that opponent may pay X, where X is the number of cards in their hand. If they don't, they can't attack you this combat. This is a pretty crazy protection creature if you can keep it on the field. Any deck that uses Ghostly Prison can probably use this card too, especially if you have ways of making this thing almost impossible to remove. It's kind of a catch-22 though. If a player is drawing a lot of cards, they can't attack you. They might just have a card in their hand that can remove Champions of Minas Tirith before they go into combat. On the flip side, if an opponent is dumping their hand, they'll also be able to attack you freely because they won't have any cards in their hand. I think this one might be pricey at first, but later on as people find its weaknesses in their own meta, it's going to drop in price, finding a comfy spot around $1, which is less than what Ghostly Prison currently sees at about $2. Now for the rest of the new precon cards. 4th Aorlingas, I guess, is a sorcery for X red-white that says create X 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to one or more players this turn, you become the monarch. The tokens this card creates are pretty good, especially with the amount of mana red can generate in a turn. The monarch here just gets you monarch no matter who you attack if the current monarch can't be attacked for whatever reason. I can see this going into a Jeskai Spellslinger deck as a possible finisher, or even in a generic Boros creature token deck. It's pretty useful, but it's not going to be more than $1 as a single. In this precon, depending on what legendary creatures you have out on the field, it can be pretty devastating. Call for Aid is a sorcery for 4 and a red that says gain control of all creatures target opponent controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain haste until end of turn. You can't attack that player this turn, and you can't sacrifice those creatures this turn. Obviously, this is a bad mob rule for 1 less mana. It's a flavor win, but definitely a dust collector once you swap this out for mob rule, if you even go that route and not replace it with anything way better. Taunt from the Rampart is a sorcery for 3 red-white. It says goad all creatures your opponents control. Until your next turn, those creatures can't block. This one is actually pretty amazing to me. More often than not, your opponents will make deals and arrangements for survival if you play something like Disrupt Decorum. This bad boy makes it so they're taking heavy damage if they can't get their creatures tapped. It costs 1 more mana, but if the table is at a stalemate due to a giant board state, this will win you the game. or at least make it possible to win before they destroy you after your next turn. However, once again, even though it's this good, I really think that this is a very, very good card. It will probably see a price around $1, just like Disrupt Decorum. I'm definitely picking one or a few of these up if they're as cheap as I think they're going to be. Crown of Gondor is a legendary equipment for 3 with an equip cost of 4, but it costs 1 if you're the monarch. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control, and when a legendary creature ETBs under your control, if there is no monarch, you become the monarch. You're going to run this if you're making a lot of creatures and want a single creature to be massive. It's pretty good and has a cheap equip cost for what you get, and monarch is always a fun side mechanic to play with. I think this is a great card, but again, it's not going to be expensive on its own if you want to pick it up as a single. Fealty to the Realm is an aura for 4 and a blue that says, when it ETBs, you become the monarch. The monarch controls enchanted creature. The enchanted creature attacks each combat if able and can't attack you. Now this one is pretty weird. You essentially goad the enchanted creature, but since it's most likely changing boards each turn, it'll usually have summoning sickness, and then every opponent can take control of it, gaining whatever benefit it gives. If you stick it on your commander and force your opponents to attack with it, then I guess you have a pseudo slicer, but I just don't see it. For a 5 mana aura, it's probably better to use mind control instead. I really don't think it's anything better than Dust Collector status. Oath of Yorl is a saga for 3 red-white. The first chapter says create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens. The second chapter says create 2 2/2 red human knight tokens with trample and haste. And the third chapter says put an indestructible counter on up to 1 target human. You become the monarch. This is an okay token generator, and it'll make your strongest human indestructible, but it's an expensive and slow saga, so it's like most of the other cards in this precon. It's going to be a really cheap pickup, under $1. And finally, we have the notable cards in the deck. Combat Celebrant is a big one. It's a big extra combat card and is about $15 right now, and it's only been printed once, so its inclusion in this precon is a pretty big deal. Supreme Verdict is a beastly board wipe at around $4. Talisman of Progress is the most expensive of the talisman at around $5 also. And then there's the trifecta of tribal artifacts: Herald's Horn, Vanquisher's Banner, and Door of Destinies. The horn and the banner were recently reprinted in the Night Precon from March of the Machine, and thanks to this additional reprint, the price should drop to a really reasonable level. Door of Destinies is between $10 and $20, so if this debuts cheaper than that, I would really pick it up. I'm pretty sure I got all of the most important cards from the deck, but all of the new art makes it a little more difficult to spot new cards next to older cards that I don't know. Correct me in the comments if I missed some, one, a few, or anything. Just let me know and let me know what I got wrong. Besides that, this precon seems like an absolute beast as it is, and with only a few really cheap upgrades, it'll probably be on par with the most recent Night Tribal precon we got. Same with that Knight deck. This precon is a great pickup if you need a tribal deck and want to roll with humans in this case. If you already have a humans deck, there are plenty of singles in this precon that you'll probably be able to pick up really, really cheap. I didn't catch any cards in particular that are going to be crazy expensive because the individual card is going to be subject to the deck's theme and color identity. However, I don't think that this is the precon that I would pick up. Upgrading it is going to leave a lot of cards in the bulk box never to be seen again, and if you already have a humans deck, the great singles from the precon are going to be really cheap pickups. I'm personally going to pass on this precon because I bought the Night precon from the last set. But what do you think? Am I completely wrong about the singles and the overall opinion on the Riders of Rohan precon? Let me know in the comments below, along with the singles you'll be picking up for it and the decks you'll decide to put them in. Next time, we'll take a look at the Hosts of Mordor deck, so look forward to that. But until then, like the video if you liked the video, dislike it if you disliked it, and until next time, I'm Space Coconut, and you're welcome.